Kimball Keller from Blue Sky Productions and Tweetsie Railroad here in North Carolina. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Attraction Pros COVID-19 video series. It's a tough question, but how you doing?
Hanging in there, Matt and Josh. It's been tough. We've been laid off since March 20th from the park when everybody started pulling triggers and all that. So I came back to Jacksonville, and it's pretty rough here. We live on the water and we have a boat, but you can only use the boat so much. I mean, there's other things you have to do, like cut the grass and feed the dogs and stuff. But it's been rough. I mean, it's been a psychological hit. And I kind of compared this going back to, even though it's not a really comparison to 9/11, but when I was on Ringling, I was on the train when 9/11 happened, and we were going from California to Seattle. So once we got into the mountains, we lost sight of everything that was happening, with the airplanes and all that. But it was a big blow once we arrived in Seattle and the world was in turmoil. Mm-hmm. So I kind of equate it to that of what we're experiencing now, that although it's not as bad as it was then, it was just a sudden light switch off, everything stopped. And that's what it's felt like for all of us in the, theme park, entertainment, basically anything, and how far-reaching the tentacles are in this kind of business. So it's been rough.
Kimball, it's funny, not really funny, but interesting. You say you remember where you were for 9/11. I vividly remember where I was when I first heard the news. I was in my car listening to the radio. I wonder what it's going to be in 5 or 10 years when we talk about COVID-19. We're all at home, right? So
right. Right.
I guess I remember where I was. So you have a really interesting and unique perspective that I'd love to tap into in terms of, all of your work with theme park shows and cruise lines and auditioning and, kind of a different avenue that we really haven't talked about much. So I'd love if you could kind of give us a rundown of kind of how that end of the entertainment industry has been hit and kind of what you're seeing there.
Well, starting in January, we went through all the auditions. So we did SCTC up to, and then we went to Greensboro for the outdoor theater stuff. So we're talking Under These Hills, theaters, ballets, orchestras, a lot of where they're getting these college kids that are graduating to seniors or have the summer off and want to work in either an outdoor theater or on a cruise ship or Disney, Universal, whatever. So all of us were together in Memphis and in Louisville for these auditions. So over a 5-day period, we may have seen, 3,000 or 4,000 people auditioning for these shows. So after that, after each of those auditions, you wait a few days and you start making offers. So all these kids had received offers and were ready to go to work. And then boom, the light switch goes off and now nobody has a job. And even the ones that are currently employed in the business, like I was mentioning earlier, Disney laid off 43,000 people here in Orlando. That's not even including SeaWorld or Universal or the other smaller little, family entertainment centers or theme parks or whatever around the country that all just kind of stopped. So it was a pretty dramatic blow, not only to people's excitement and, what they were expecting and the money they were counting on. The cruise ships, as we've seen, had people stranded. Those entertainers that were looking forward to new contracts, musicians, etc., it's all just gone away.
Yeah. So what has, over the last couple of months or so, we're recording this around the 3rd week of May. What has your life looked like? What's been occupying your time in the last couple of months as a result of all this?
Well, I've been trying to make the best of it. I've been, of course, using a lot of research, doing a lot of stuff with IAPA, trying to just better myself to make myself more competitive, but also staying constantly in contact with our staff at Tweetsie Railroad, trying to determine what we're going to do. A lot of us are bound on what the federal government and the state government and the governors are saying as far as timelines, number of people, what you can do, what you can't do. And we're still waiting. I think all of us are watching the big guys like Disney. We're all waiting to see what Disney's going to do. And when you look and see what happened in Disney, was it Shanghai when they opened? And you look at the numbers that were projected and the tickets sold out right away. And they only were going to allow 33% of the capacity. Well, the things I've been watching and the research I've been doing, there was about 500 people in the park. So things were really trimmed down. And when you look at what that affects, labor is a huge factor. For us, for instance, and many other parks, our season is right now. And when we get to July or August, is it worth opening a theme park trying to go through until the kids go back to school, then you only go to weekends. So how do you justify all this? And, do you look at the finances and say, well, we think it's better to wait till 2021. So constant engagement, researching, listening, watching, talking to people like Matt and yourself, and trying to get the best information so that we can proceed with the best information. And there's a lot of it out there, and that's the thing, it's ever changing. We see it every day, and at times it seems like it's a little overwhelming. The news is just blasting us every day with the negative and what's going on, and it's hard to absorb all that and make clear decisions when we don't have a firm date of what we can do and when we can do it.
Yeah, I know a lot of the folks that I've been talking to, they say, if we just had a date, then we'd have something to shoot for, right? And then we could figure out, here's the date, and then we can kind of work backwards and figure out what do we need to do to get there. And I think that's one of the toughest things. So, you mentioned the actors and the musicians and all those folks that were going to be under contract and going to be working in theme parks and cruise lines and things like that. Do you have a sense of what they're going through and what's happened to those folks during this time?
A lot of sadness and a lot of, what do we do? Because a lot of those people are under contracts. So it's not like they're on a payroll where they're going to be eligible. I don't know the specifics in and out, it depends on the states, but some of those people that are under contracts are not eligible for, unemployment. So they might be able to get the self-employment from the federal government, but I'm sure that's affecting a lot of people right now. And the fact that it's taking so long for people to receive that money, when a lot of people that I've worked with in the past, that when you're looking at those types of jobs, live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And what do you do? So it's been rough.
Yeah. You can't necessarily skip a week. One of the things that you mentioned is, something that we all know, we're all trying to stay up to date with, is that everything varies state by state. And everyone's kind of putting together their, phased reopening plans based on certain contingencies and, and a number of different factors. And while there's some common thread lines, there's also a lot of similarities. I'm in Illinois, and I was just talking to my mom down in Florida last night. It's it's a completely different, different scenario, as you know.
Right.
And then I think of something like a traveling tour, whether it's, Disney on Ice or Monster Jam or even, concerts or anything like that, who are in a very different position than, say, Disney, which are fixed to the states that they're in, or other location-based entertainment. So what's going on with all of that? Because I imagine everyone scrambling to reroute their tour based off of which states maybe are the most lenient, or is everyone just kind of held back right now?
I think everyone's kind of held back right now. They're starting to look at that. Like one of my connections on LinkedIn owns a transportation company, and he's been really proactive because they normally are moving shows around the world. And what I've watched him do is pick up some of the slack through other transportation products like PPE, for hospitals or things like that, where they've got the equipment and they've made use of it while they're in this downtime. But companies like Live Nation and people that do huge outdoor concerts, I've even seen some trends. Keith Urban did a thing where he invited 200 cars to a movie theater and had his band all wearing masks on a stage doing concert for everybody in their cars. We've even seen that in the circus industry. People are doing outdoor circuses where you can drive up and park around the way it's set up. So people are adapting and trying to figure out the best way that they can keep revenue. But I tell you who I feel probably the worst for right now is anybody that's in entertainment that does fair shows, circuses, shrine dates. Any of those people are at home and they have no revenue coming in, and a lot of the fairs are even canceling now. So fairs, festivals, concerts, those huge gatherings, it's all up in the air. And every day it just gets worse and worse. And we try to be proactive and try to be positive and encouraging, but it's reality, and it's not doom and gloom. It's just the way it is right now.
Yeah. Kimball, you mentioned obviously the financial aspect, which we can't ignore, for sure. But I think there's the other side of that is also the mental aspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got performers and you've got people who love to serve. And Josh and I have talked about this 100 times that can't do that right now, or are trying to find ways to, kind of fulfill that part of their soul where they can serve others and they can entertain. So I'm curious, what kind of creative things have you seen that people have done just because they're quarantined, they're locked down, but gosh darn it, they got to entertain someone?
A lot of online stuff, a lot of concert for musicians. My partner own a coffee company, and we sponsor a country musician. He's just gone off the deep end because all his dates are canceled. So he's doing online concerts and asking for donations and selling his products, T-shirts, CDs, whatever, which has been very effective for him. I see people that are jugglers and people that are, trapeze stuff. They're doing a lot of videos and YouTube, that kind of thing, trying to stay in practice and current. But it's tough right now to keep that motivation, especially when you're not getting paid for it and you don't know when you're going to go back to work.
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense, of wanting to continue to occupy your time with your craft for the purpose of honing it, or just, kind of keeping that mental occupation, but then being able to separate it out from, this is, normally I'm paid to do this, but I'm not being paid to do this right now.
Well, and let me throw this out too. If you're in a specialized field, let's say you're a Cirque du Soleil performer and you're a bungee jumper, or you're a trapeze artist, or you're a scuba diver, I mean, you have to adapt to that as to what can I do with this skill set right now since I'm not performing. I'm sitting at the house, I have no equipment. Right. How do I stay in shape? If they call me tomorrow and say, hey, we need to come back to work, which is probably not going to happen.
But when it does,
you've got to be ready for it. And that's the sad part about it, is I just don't want people to lose faith. And we're trying to be encouraging and get through this. We'll come back even stronger than we were. I worry about some of the larger companies like Cirque du Soleil and some of the theme parks. I'm even seeing now where one of them stock is down to $2.20, and the leverage is just high, and people are starting to look at that aspect. Well, we can take advantage of this and purchase these parks for nothing, or these shows for nothing. Cirque is in a unique financial position because they didn't prepare for not ever having shows like this. And now it looks like they're going to have to go back to the Canadian government and ask for some help.
Mm-hmm.
So Kimball, as we, are hearing about states that are opening up, and, certain people are talking about their phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 openings, I'm curious what you see might change or might be the new normal for entertainment, because, you think about social distancing, from an audience perspective, maybe you could put people in chairs that are separated, but from a performer perspective, the green rooms are often small. When they're on stage, they're right next to each other. So how do you see things like that, really impacting, getting back to entertaining people like that?
Well, it's scary. I've seen a couple of postings on LinkedIn. You've probably seen them too, where people have gone into theaters and done social distancing on the seating maps. And it's horrible when you look at it from a financial aspect. For instance, when I was at Hatfield McCoy, our theater could seat about 730 people, and we were pretty much sold out all the time. If you have to move tables and social distance, not only for the wait staff, but now how are you going to limit the cast and crew who are normally out in the audience, mingling with the guests or out in the lobby? You're taking away that feeling of connection that, the Iron Curtain of where the cast and the crew are connected to the audience. Now you're removing that and you're separating the audience even more. It's going to have an effect.
What are the differences that you're seeing between entertainment, whether it's theater-based entertainment, arena, stadium, compared to larger theme parks? Recently, one of our colleagues, Eric Beard, over the weekend posted this very long article of why people should restore their confidence in amusement parks. And one of the things that he stressed was, amusement parks or theme parks are not mass gatherings, and specifically highlighted the differentiation between a theme park and, say, a stadium or an entertainment venue, where people are mostly stationary and close together. Do you see there being a different perception in those because of those elements of it, or is this all lumped together? And then I guess what's being done from the communication standpoint to restore confidence?
Well, I think from a communication standpoint, you have to jump on this on social media and let people know that you're doing everything you can to keep them safe and your employees safe. But a lot of this is so unknown. It keeps changing. We don't know. This is version number 19 of the coronavirus. This thing's been around. We're used to the flu every year. You get a vaccine or whatever. But this thing just came out of nowhere. And, even though the death rate is less than some other things, we don't know what it's doing or how it's doing until they figure out and we come up with a vaccine. They're going to have some type of social distancing in place, I believe. And when you look at a lot of the sporting events now that are trying to get engaged, NASCAR just did a run this weekend. The NFL is trying to do training camps, but they won't have any audiences. And it's like, that's a huge financial impact, not only on those teams and the stadiums and the cities that own the revenue. Where's all that going to get made up? And how do we get back to, and I keep hearing this is the new normal. I don't think this is the new normal. I hate that word, actually. I think we just have to get through it and get back to where we were. You can always wash your hands or, do whatever to prevent, but I don't think we know enough about it yet to just jump and open everything and say, go for it. Herd mentality. I'm not sure that's the answer to how we get past this thing. And it's just kind of a wait and see. And, going back to your earlier point when you said there's no light switch or, target date of when everything just flips back on. It's a case by case. Even, where I'm at in North Carolina, we're relying on the government to tell us what we can do. And if, Florida even is saying no groups of no more than 10. We just opened our barbershops this week, our hair salons. Restaurants are now at 50% capacity. But a lot of it's a little too late. Some of these businesses have already gone out of business because they couldn't survive. So.
Yeah. And on the one hand, I feel really bad for those businesses. I really do, because this is not anything that they can control. They're doing the best they can. They're doing the best, for their employees that they can and for their guests. Mm-hmm. At the same time, there's a part of me that says, something better might come out of this, down the road. Right. And so I know it's a little bit of a crystal ball, but, what do you see maybe as some other better things that might come out of this? Even maybe things we're doing right now that we can, extend into the, I hate to say it, new normal, but into that next realm of our lives that might be actually better than they were before the pandemic.
Well, I think a lot of companies are having to get creative now. Like I just was reading yesterday, I think it was Norwegian or Royal Caribbean was doing away with all their buffets on the ships. Mm. We have 3 cruise ships parked here in Jacksonville. We were out on the boat the other night, and there's a Norwegian gym is parked right here and with a minimal crew, just sitting, waiting to get back to the new normal. I think Carnival starts sailing again in August, but the entertainment venues where you have those large production shows where there's a lot of costume, glitz and glamour and entertainers in those large theaters where all the passengers are gathered to watch. What are they going to do now? Do away with entertainment? I mean, that's one of the reasons why people go on the cruises. I mean, when you have days at sea, you need something to do. So I'm not really sure. I think the technology, I've already seen some of that. I was doing an IOPA seminar the other day on the food and beverage aspect of it. And some things that are creative things that are coming out of that, like no signature, no cash, trying to do more point of sale systems, less hands-on, no self-serve stations. So they're really having to pump this up. I think Six Flags said they're going to do all prepackaged food. That's something that people are going to have to get used to. And right now people are, one thing that I'm seeing also is people are saying, we're not coming to your theme park if we have to wear a mask. And the other side of that is, if we don't have to wear a mask, we're not coming to your theme park. So who's going to show up? And that's a big unknown as well. And one of the things we're looking at is if we do pull the trigger and open, what's the turnout going to be? And what do we have to, like other parks, what is our minimum gate, attendance that we can break even?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things, that you mentioned, or gave a lot of really good examples, kind of from that crystal ball standpoint, is looking at the creativity that we've already seen. You mentioned, did you say it was Keith Urban who did the drive-thru concert? Like we're going to see more things like that, more leveraging online resources like this. You mentioned the cashless payments, things like that. even just walking around my neighborhood where there's a lot of, restaurants, bars, retail. When this all first started, it was a complete ghost town.
Mm-hmm.
And then, walking around the last couple of weeks, I've been saying kind of this life finds a way moment that I'm starting to see. And maybe that's an equivalent saying to the new normal, but I don't know. But, I'm looking at restaurants that are now turning into pop-up kiosks, essentially. Some of them have, they have to-go windows that they've built already. Some of them, are like leveraging just the entrance to their store and just kind of putting up a cart, and they're selling food and even cans of beer. And I don't know if the laws have changed.
Yeah, in Florida they have. That was kind
really?
of thing. You could even get alcohol delivered with food, because
Right.
they're trying to stay open for business. But
Yeah.
I think with like water, it takes the path of least resistance. So if it's on a hill, it's
Right.
going to go with gravity. So I think people are trying to find a way to survive this and get through it, knowing that we'll get back to some kind of normalcy at some point with other factors. But we just don't know. And I think we have to gain the customer and the guest confidence back to assure them that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe, as well as cast and crew and employees and all that. And I think that's a huge factor of trying to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kimball, you mentioned who's going to show up, and I think that is a big unknown. The good thing is some places have started to kind of open up, and I think about City Walk in Orlando, that at Universal Orlando Resort, that has opened up. And John Hallenbeck was on a call that I was on the other day from IAPA.
Love John.
Yeah, he's great. He's great. And he was saying that he was talking to the director of security for Universal, and there were some people that came in, they said, we're not going to wear a mask. And right there at the entrance, they said, that's your choice. You don't have to wear a mask, but you're not coming in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they said there were only a few instances of that, that they were kind of pleasantly surprised that most people were, if like you said, social media, get out in front of it and say, this is the expectation. This is the reality. Here's what's going to happen when you get here. And then make sure all those line up. I think people are going to be, kind of falling in line with it.
Well, Matt, the one thing that's worried me, or not worried me, but I've been thinking about it a lot from a litigious standpoint. And what I'm worried about is frivolous lawsuits. And if a theme park opens and somebody gets sick or people get infected or whatever, even though it may not go anywhere, it's going to be the process of people starting to file frivolous lawsuits. I got sick at your park, or my son works there and he got sick. Where's that all going to go? And the worst thing about it is not even so much the lawsuit, it's the PR. I got sick at your park. And it's like wildfire. It only takes the one negative comment, and then, what do? People aren't going to come. So that's what we're kind of looking at now with all this, is like, where do we go, which direction, and how fast do we go there, and what happens when we get there?
Right. And that's why that communication is key that you mentioned earlier, of using your social media channels, of saying this, this is what we are doing because, we're concerned for you and we want to do everything we can. So I think, when that does happen, I think it's more of a when versus an if. Someone's going to find a way to trace it back to, an entertainment experience that they had.
Well, and when you look at it, what everybody's doing, if you look at their social media and their websites, they all basically have the same kind of notification at the top. We don't know when we're opening yet, but we can assure you that when we do, we'll tell you, et cetera.
Right.
But then, listening to some of these IAPA seminars and what different venues are doing with the stickers on the ground, the social distancing, but some people are going to ignore that totally. They're not going to stand on a sticker just because you're asking to. And then we're also putting employees in a position of, okay, how do you enforce this? Are you encouraging your employees to, be the police and say, if you don't stand here, we're going to throw you out of the park or out of the theater or whatever? So we're putting on a different role. Plus, we're also having to look at more clean personnel. How do we keep up with this to ensure that guest satisfaction as well as their confidence? We're going to have to employ more people and different methods of cleaning or more intense cleaning methods. So there's a lot that everybody, I'm sure all of our heads are spinning trying to figure out what to do. But like I said, we're all watching the bigger parks, theaters, et cetera, to see what they're going to do. For concerts and things like that, it's a ways off. It may not be till next year before we get back to any kind of normal with that.
Maybe drive-ins.
Yeah.
Drive-ins, yeah.
But filling venues with people. This week, I believe the shows back in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee are going to try to open with social distancing. We'll see what happens. If people come. the other thing too is, what are we doing with ticket prices, for these shows? Are we going to discount anything because we're inconveniencing the guests, or are we still going full bore?
Right. Well, from a from a theme park standpoint, if you're at Shanghai Disney and you've got only 500 people there, that's like a VIP experience all day long, right? I'd pay more for that,
right.
But actually, Kimball, I want to get back to your point about the litigiousness, because I totally agree that can be an issue. And quite frankly, here's the lawsuit and here's the PR, like you said, right? The PR is going to be worse. One of the things that I heard Disney is doing is, and I don't know exactly where the signage is, but there's signage, there's messaging that, you are taking a responsibility when you're coming to a facility like this, that you could be exposed, and essentially what they're saying is that's on you, right? We're going to do everything that we can, but there's still an inherent risk when you go someplace and you experience all these different people that, especially if you're not taking your precautions, that you could be putting yourself at risk. So I know that's kind of like the disclaimer on the back of the ticket, but at least it's there, right? At least we're thinking about it and saying there's some sort of responsibility on their part.
Right. Well, there's even been a discussion of some kind of form when you come in the gate or venue or whatever that you sign, but what is that worth, litigiously? I mean, is that going to stand up in court that I signed the disclaimer, so I'm not liable?
Maybe, but I mean, this type of communication is certainly not new to the industry. That, if you think of just any ride, even small kiddie rides, have a very large sign saying you should not ride if, XYZ, you're riding at your own risk.
Right.
And of course, the parks and all entertainment venues, we're doing everything we can to minimize the likelihood, to be able to minimize the risk. But at the end of the day, going to a theme park, you are exposed to other people just the same as if you're going to Walmart or the grocery store.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And people aren't following directions in the grocery stores either. Publix.
One-way aisles. I
know, right?
We have Publix here in Florida, and their stickers on. They first started with that blue painter tape, putting down the arrows, and people weren't following that. Then they put out actual, printed diagrams or whatever. And then one of the Publix here is actually calling people out on their PA system. You're going the wrong way. I'm just like, people are going to do whatever. They're people, They're not going to follow directions.
Yeah. Well, I'll admit, like, I guess I tend to go shopping when other people are not. So like it's not that busy. Yeah. So if the arrow is pointing the wrong way, but I really need the pasta sauce right down there, I'm going down. There's nobody there.
I walk backwards.
I was gonna say, well, what if you're already on that aisle and you got to turn around and make a U-turn and go back to get something you forgot? Are you violating the rules? And
just keep your cart going the same direction as the arrow, and you're okay.
Right. I think a lot of it's overkill. But then it goes back to my original point: is we don't know what this is. We don't know how bad it is. They think they know. They're working on vaccines, tests, etc. But it's been pretty rough the way it's shown itself, and the news media is not helping.
Right. Well, Kimball, we really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for all the insight you've been able to give us, especially around the entertainment space that we haven't really talked that much about. So do you have any kind of lasting thoughts or last words that you'd like to kind of leave us with?
Well, I'd say that we have to get back and build the consumer and the guest confidence, and we're all in this together. And I think the more that, knowledge is power. And I think the more that we discuss things and try to come up with a game plan and see what works for one, may not work for something else, and we talk about it, we're all in this together, and I think we can achieve greatness again. It's just going to be a minute.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Kimball, for your time. I hope you stay safe, and I hope that we can all get together soon and go see a show or be in a show or do something fun that's entertaining. But thanks so much for your time today, Kimball.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.